Morning, everyone. I think we might kick off. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on beverage carton recycling towards a lower carbon future. So this webinar will cover updates on beverage carton recycling in Australia, the saveBOARD recycling facility, council acceptance of cartons, education, and preparation for community inquiries. Just some housekeeping. You will all have your cameras and microphones automatically turned off at this stage. If not, please mute yourselves. We'll turn them on during the Q&A section towards the end, so you can ask a question via video. Please do introduce yourself in the chat. My name is Ryan Collins. I'm your host today, Head of Impact and Research at Planet Ark, and I'll be joined by Vikas Ahuja from Tetra Pak.
Thanks, Ryan. And Lisa Coffer, who's we're very privileged to have, will talk specifically about some of what she's achieved at Yarra City, somewhere on this journey as well. Ryan, are you okay for me to kick off?
I'll just do our acknowledgement of country, and just a little bit about Planet Ark. I'm joining you today from Ku-ring-gai land on Darkinjung country on the Central Coast. I particularly want to thank the traditional owners for their custodianship of the beautiful lakes where I walk and the beaches where I surf and swim. Planet Ark acknowledges the traditional owners of the places in which we live, work and play, and recognise their enduring relationships they have with their lands, waters, and pay our respects to elders past and present. I'm sure most of you are fairly familiar with Planet Ark. We are a not-for-profit being established over 30 years ago. We work with all areas of society, individuals, communities, governments and businesses, providing positive environmental actions for everyone. This is our vision and our programs. It seems we seems to introduce a new program every year lately, you'll see those recycling programs that you may be familiar with in the bottom right, our Recycling Near You and National Recycling Week campaigns, and some of the newer programs, our ACE Hub or Australian Circular Economy Hub and Product Stewardship Hub, as well as our regeneration programs, National Tree Day, which is actually on Sunday, this coming Sunday. Get involved in some tree planting. And just briefly, over 1 billion liquid paperboard cartons are used by Australians every year. Now, this packaging has been tricky to recycle at curbside, but from Planet Ark's perspective, we're focused on recycling and circular economy solutions, kind of acting as a facilitator between carton manufacturers, councils, recyclers, and the public. And those, again, are some of the relevant programs for this topic for Planet Ark. So we encourage participation in this webinar. Please add your questions to the chat at any time or the Q&A function. We will have room for discussion for this at the end. So now I'm going to introduce Vikas. He is the Sustainability Director at Tetra Pak. His focus in Australia and New Zealand is to build recycling plants for Tetra Pak and increase the rate of carton recycling. So over to you, Vikas.
Thanks, Ryan. Morning, everyone. Super delighted to have you along. I see a bunch of people who've been here at our previous two Planet Ark facilitated webinars on carton recycling. So it's really nice to see you back. And of course, it's, what feels good to me about that is, the journey we've been on for the last 3 years. So, we're getting to a great point in that journey. So it's nice to be able to talk about that. Ryan, could you put up the next slide, please? So today I'm going to talk a little bit, and Ryan already touched on this, an update on where saveBOARD, a dedicated carton recycler that's operating in Australia and New Zealand's at. Then specifically start to talk about what's happening with material recovery facilities, and I think this is what will be of most interest to you. Touch a little bit around council acceptance of cartons, household education, preparedness for community queries. And of course, this is where I'll bring Lisa in. Yarra, as you know, has been the council that's led in Victoria into introducing cartons back into curbside. And we're super privileged to hear directly from Lisa on, why and how Yarra City and Lisa in particular have achieved that. We'll come back to some key takeaways and then get into a Q&A. Next slide, please, Ryan. Thank you. So saveBOARD update. And we can go straight to the next slide, please, Ryan. So some of you have heard me talk about saveBOARD for the last 3 years. saveBOARD's a great solution for our market because it's a full carton recycling scheme. It takes caps and straws and all parts of the carton and turns them into board. saveBOARD's been operating in Warragamba and Sydney since December 22. And what we're delighted about is that we've got, and you'll see in some of those pictures, we've got some, icon brands, KFC and Woolworths, that have bought in as long-term customers. They've put the saveBOARD product in their standards so that every time they do a new store or refurb, saveBOARD gets used in that build. I think it's fair to say that other sales from saveBOARD are lumpy. They're very project-based. So we're certainly looking for other large long-term commitment customers like KFC and Woolies to add to that. The mannequins in the bottom left-hand corner, that's the National Gallery of Victoria. That was the Alex McQueen show that was on recently, and saveBOARD was used as a backdrop for that. So, it's getting a bit of attention, and I'll show you some other examples of that. Next slide, please, Ryan. This was a segment with Planet Shapers, which is a part of Channel 10. And this is part of, saveBOARD getting attention. So rather than just hearing me talk, let's roll the video and you'll get a bit of a walk through the saveBOARD plant and a little bit of what the use of those cartons is being with saveBOARD.
Who doesn't get to the store for a few days, you'll understand just how important this type of packaging is. But for all of the conveniences of this carton, until recently, it wasn't able to be locally recycled here in Australia. And just think about how many of these you use every week. That's a huge waste problem. Until 2019, Australia was shipping more than 8,000 tonnes of these cartons overseas to be recycled. But thanks to Tetra Pak and saveBOARD, the cartons can now be turned directly into this right here in Australia.
So Laura, this is the finished product that's ready to be transported to wherever it's going. And that's how it comes in those bales. So I love looking at these bales because by checking out the brands that are in them and what the cartons look like, you can tell what state they've come from or how they were collected.
Where in the past would containers like these end up?
Yeah, Laura, so most of the beverage cartons that people were putting in their recycling bins would have been sorted with mixed paper and would have ended up at a paper recycler somewhere in the world where the demand for paper is high.
And what has changed?
A few things have changed. So China changed its policy around recyclable materials that they would accept, and they're a big buyer of paper. They still are a big buyer of paper.
And so where does Tetra Pak fit in?
We decided that we wanted a local solution. Tetra Pak's aim globally is to make sure that our cartons don't end up in litter or don't end up not recycled. We want to get them recycled everywhere we can. And our play in this space really is to work with innovative companies like saveBOARD to find recycling solutions that work locally, like in this instance in Australia.
Cartons, like Tetra Pak, have revolutionised food storage. Long life cartons store fragile foods like milk for up to 2 years without refrigeration, which is a gold standard. And cartons are easy to store and ship. What about the shape of these packs? They're all the same.
I talk about it being a nerdy brick shape, but actually it really helps. I mean, you can see on the shelf that it actually packs really well. And from a supermarket's perspective, it means I can get more product on the shelf, so it's less labor costs in just being able to stack shelves. But, this has serious environmental consequences. Because it packs together well, it means you get more product in a box, you get more product on a pallet, you get more product in a truck, in a container, so that all the shipping carbon emissions are significantly reduced. It's also really light. Like, we use the least material compared to other forms of packaging to hold a beverage. And that means less material means less environmental impact because you've just used less of the stuff.
As consumers, we believe recycling into the curbside bin is doing our bit. However, there is an even better way to ensure the right waste gets to the right recycler. This one looks like the one we have in the store.
It is actually. That's the one that we picked out there. And you can see here the oat chocolate that we were looking at in the store. And you can also see the straws that go in with the stream and caps that are still on that all get recycled together. So, Laura, the key to better recycling is actually better sorting. We've actually just implemented an artificial intelligence robot to sort beverage cartons from commingled bins, from recycling bins. And they're going to start coming here, and we'd love to expand that around the country.
It really is impressive that everything, including the plastic, can be recycled into saveBOARD.
One of the reasons why I think this is a great way to do it.
So once the waste is sorted, what then? How is saveBOARD actually made?
What's going on here is we get a bunch of waste product coming in and we turn it into saveBOARD. After the products are collected in the container deposit schemes around the country, they arrive here in bales and we separate them down onto the process where we chop them up, we mix them up together with other little components of plastics, and we put them through and we cook them just like a toasted cheese sandwich, and we produce saveBOARD. Total of saveBOARD is 99.5% recycled product. As the board then comes through, it's then palletized and ready for sale. And you can see all the bits and pieces of material all throughout the board.
So every type of material that you use in saveBOARD actually comes in these cartons already?
That's right. All the products we need to make saveBOARD are in that one carton.
And what about colours and sizes and shapes? Does any of that matter with your cartons?
That's the fantastic thing about saveBOARD. It makes no difference.
When you look closely at saveBOARD, you can actually see logos and some text. What is that?
That's right. Look, it's a great thing about saveBOARD that when we get the product, we shred it, and we shred it to about a size where you can still visibly see that it's waste packaging. So you can really see that provenance of that's my waste that went into the container deposit scheme ending up as saveBOARD.
Yeah, it's a perfect all-round messaging of here's my waste and here's the end product, and I'm doing something good with it. Why did you choose a building product as the end product for saveBOARD?
saveBOARD is able to be used as a plasterboard replacement, MDF, plywood replacement, ceiling tiles. So it has enormous scale to solve for an enormous recycling problem. Low carbon, water resistant, mold resistant, heavy impact, and it's got all of the other functional benefits that any other building material that it's trying to replace. When it is finished for use, we can recycle it again and again and again.
And will you turn it back into saveBOARD?
Straight back into saveBOARD.
saveBOARD's popularity is growing fast. There's already big brands installing the board in public areas.
Hi, Laura. I'm Crystal.
Hey, Crystal, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Come on in. I'll show you the board.
Great. Crystal, why are these boards in this area?
Well, this is a very high traffic area. So these boards are actually really easy to clean. Yeah, so you can actually see the waste packaging in the walls. You can see little bits and pieces of writing.
Yeah, you can feel it and see it with lots of different colours.
Yeah.
The high impact resistance of the board makes it a great choice for commercial spaces that get a lot of bumps.
What we'd love is for developers, builders, big construction companies to see a viable product in use in a place like this and know that they can use it as well.
Currently, the best way to ensure that your used cartons end up in saveBOARD is to drop them off at a container deposit centre. And you get some money back too.
We think we've got a really valuable resource in a carton, and we want to see that resource used again and again.
We would like people to know there is a home for the used packaging material, and that's saveBOARD.
Every time you choose a product, choose something that you know is made with a natural material and that has a local recycling solution. You want your purchasing choices to make a difference in the world.
Recycling will win in the end, won't it?
Well, I think recycling should win in the end because we need to do more with our natural resources.
Thanks, Ryan. We can go to the next slide. I saw a query about how much materials we need to recycle, and I'll come back to those questions in the Q&A later. So one of the joys of working with something that's, taking a product that's in everybody's households, soy, almond milk, oat milk, milk cartons, and turning it into a construction product is getting lots of attention. So we also got a spot on the morning show and on Better Homes and Gardens. And Joanna Griggs was awesome. Her husband works in the construction sector, so she was all across the details of what saveBOARD could offer or not. So that was super good. Next slide, please, Ryan. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening at MRFs. And you saw in the Planet Shapers clip, we're already talking about AI robotics. That AI robot is installed at API Curbside, which is a MRF in Victoria. And of course, because it's AI, it piqued media interest, and in particular because, it's AI being used to sort recycling. So we got a spot on the Channel 7 News as well, and in a bunch of media publications about the use of AI. This is starting to become a pretty popular technology. We've pinched it from USA. There's 13 MRFs across USA that are using AI robots to sort cartons. So, this is starting to take off, mostly because it's relatively easy to retrofit and considerably cheaper than other forms of automated sorting in MRFs. Next slide, please, Ryan. We're also trying something a little bit different. Some of you will know that there are trials going on of collecting flexibles, soft plastics, in commingled recycling bin, provided they're bagged. And what we're trying with IQ Renew in the Central Coast of New South Wales is a similar trial for bagging cartons. And there's two purposes to this. One is it's a people opt in, so it's just to find out what sort of interest there is. And the second is to see if there's a reduction in sort cost, because instead of sorting 30 cartons individually, they're all in a bag together, you sort them in one go, it should in theory reduce sort costs. So that's what this trial's about. Next slide, please, Ryan. So the key question, I guess, for us is, what can councils do? We'll go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So there's three key things here. The first one, of course, is contact your contracted MRF operator. Ask them if they can and when they'll start sorting cartons for saveBOARD or for export. There is still a viable export market for cartons. A number of the container deposit scheme operators still export their cartons to buyers in other parts of the world where demand for fibre is higher. The second thing that councils can do is to make sure that your future tenders for waste management services, recycling collection, MRF services include carton collection as one of the requirements. Italy's been hugely successful in driving this. It's a really neat example where a majority of municipalities in Italy have driven MRFs to collect and sort beverage cartons as part of the recontracting, along with other materials, right? So it's all aimed at improving circularity. The third big thing here is that Tetra Pak's offering substantial funding, and that's funding for sorting equipment at MRFs if they need new equipment. And we're also able to offer other incentives which are tailored to each MRF based on their setup or location or existing sorting capabilities. Next slide, please, Ryan. What we've seen in Victoria is that some of the councils have led. They've shifted already to put cartons back into curbside. Lisa Coffer is here, and I'm going to hand to her in a second to talk about how and why this has been achieved, why and how it's been done at Yarra City Council. Macedon Shire is the other council that's done it in Victoria recently. I know that other councils are talking to MRF operators about doing this. I'm remiss in mentioning that Cleanaway in Victoria is also sorting cartons. So Cleanaway is the largest publicly owned or listed waste management services company in Australia, and they've recently started sorting cartons as well. And of course, they operate MRFs across the country. So next slide, please, Ryan. And Lisa, I'm going to hand to you here to talk about your journey. And also when you're ready, let Ryan know to play your education clip that's waiting to go on.
Just to give you a bit of an understanding of kind of where Yarra was and why we've now started to accept, or over the last 12 months started to accept liquid paperboard. And some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but in sort of early 2019, Yarra made a decision as a council to look at our recycling and to not accept anything that was not recyclable here in Australia. We wanted to work closely with our processors, with manufacturing. We wanted to make sure there was an end market and that we weren't going to be in a position where that we were possibly going to have to send some of this material to landfill. We wanted to be transparent and open with our community. It was a hard message, particularly to begin with, not only about, yes, but I've been putting this in the bin forever. Why all of a sudden is it not recyclable? So helping them to understand what's happened and being really open about that. There was some angry residents. You probably know Yarra's community is quite in tune with some of these issues and want to know what's going on, and felt like we were possibly not being very open with them. And so we stopped collecting everything that was not recyclable here in Australia. Australian Paper Recovery is our processor, and they were also very much part of this new way of thinking that maybe we should only accept what actually is recyclable and has an end market. So at that stage, we were telling everyone to either try a different alternative for some of these products that were in liquid paperboard, or if they were needing to buy liquid paperboard, that they put it in the rubbish bin. Vikas then approached Yarra and sort of was starting to talk to us about, well, maybe there is a different option here in Australia, and maybe that's something that we could look at together. We had a conversation with APR and talked, in length. It has been 3 years, is that right, Vikas?
Yes.
Since we started the conversation about what this might look like and what sort of technology. So it wasn't just okay, let's switch it back on. It was more about, well, what does it look like? Where's the technology? Do we have an end market? How is it going to be processed? And as you know now, there is actually an AI robot that's at APR who is pulling out all of the liquid paperboard that's coming through the stream. And it's not only Yarra, but it's also Macedon Shire and a few other councils who have said yes as well. They're all going to APR. So again, as you can see, 27.5 tonnes has been processed since that started. So a great outcome from our point of view, and great that we can follow the chain. We know exactly where it's going. We know where the product is. We know there's a market, and it's a market that is pulling through rather than just pushing a product into the market, even though there may not be a place for it. I'm not sure if you were able to show. We then did as you can imagine, quite a robust education campaign with our community, and it included things like being a bit creative. And that's the little video that I'm not sure if we can show, but there was a little video produced by our comms team that has the little eyes on the cartons, and it was very well received by our community. Often we get quite negative things, but this was very positive.
We can run that.
Great.
Lisa, Ryan, could you just click on the video, please? I'm not getting the sound though.
It doesn't really matter. There's not, it's a bit of music in the background.
Perfect. I love the simplicity of that.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised at, like I said, how well received it was from our community, and that's really, you know, why and how we got to this point, and it's been exciting to work very closely with Vikas and APR.
Lisa, I'm sure there'll be a gazillion questions for you in the Q&A.
No worries.
So hang in there, and you and I can field those questions together. Thank you. So next one, please. So there's a couple of things to be mindful of here in terms of community expectations. And the kind of information we've got to support, you know, what the community is doing or householders are doing is based on a Planet Arc survey that was done a couple of years ago, and bail audits that we conduct at MRFs every year. So the Planet Arc survey showed that quite a high number of people, 75 to 82%, depending on location, demographics, etc., identify cartons as being recyclable. And the bail audit results from MRFs across the country show that the number of cartons turning up at MRFs just increases from year to year. And we've got data for the last 10 years. So more and more people are using and putting their cartons in their commingled bins, and they're ending up at MRFs. We know that from mixed paper bail audits, right? So that's what they're being sorted into. We also know that most people like the access and ease and convenience of being able to use their commingled recycled bins, and want to know with, you know, that that's going to a credible, a trustworthy place, and what's happening with the things they put in those bins. So one of the things about being able to standardize curbside commingled recycling, which is what's happening in Victoria, is that it takes out consumer confusion about what's recyclable, and it creates opportunities for larger volumes of cleaner, better sorted materials to be available to local recyclers, because then everything's geared or engineered towards that standardized collection of materials. And that little snip below is what it currently says in the Victorian government's proposed legislation. So it says that beverage cartons are accepted in the commingled collection, and that's both the gable top cartons and the long life cartons. Okay, so then talking more about community expectations. One of the things that we're seeing is that source separated materials being contained in the container deposit schemes are generally cleaner, better sorted, and therefore have higher value as a recyclable commodity. One of the issues with commingled recycling is materials just dirtier, there's lots of contamination, it's harder to sort. So CDS is a good source of materials, and I think you heard Chris Collymore, who's the country manager for saveBOARD, talking about their preference for CDS materials for that reason. CDS materials are also eminently more exportable than MRF sorted materials. So in terms of ask from councils, wherever you can, please advocate for an expansion of the CDS. The Northern Territory government currently proposed an expansion of their container deposit scheme to include all sizes of containers and more products. The South Australian government and New South Wales have also consulted on those. So it'd be great to get that scheme expanded. And of course, there's an incentive, right, for consumers to recycle better. It also helps MRFs because CDS eligible containers that go in a commingled bin and end up at a MRF means the MRF can sort those materials and claim a refund for the eligible containers. So it actually helps MRF earn revenue for sorting, which is a good outcome. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways from what you've heard from my side are, please contact your contracted MRF operator, ask when they'll start sorting cartons for saveBOARD or for export. Make collection of beverage cartons a requirement in future tenders for recycling collection and MRF services. And tell your MRF operators that Tetra Pak's offering tailored funding to support sorting beverage cartons. And I think with that, we can get into the Q&A. So, Brian, maybe back to you just for format for Q&A. I've got a bunch of questions sitting there in the chat, which I'm happy to start going through. But how do you want to run this?
Yeah, thanks, Vikas, and thanks, Lisa. Some great information and stories there. If people would like to raise their hand, they can ask a question via video. And myself and Nick will look at the questions that are in the chat and Q&A as well. But perhaps first we'll try with any raised hands. I do have one question while we wait for those raised hands, Vikas. Are there other recycled products being explored in terms of that are made, potentially can be made from cartons? I wonder if you could answer that.
Yeah, great question, Ryan. So, I mean, we picked saveBOARD because it's a full carton solution and because Australia, like New Zealand, is hugely oversupplied in recovered fibre. Because we're a net importer of packaged goods and appliances, we end up with a lot more paper and cardboard in a market than is locally required. So we export a lot of paper and cardboard to other countries. So, we needed something that played into a different sector, not the paper and cardboard sector, hence saveBOARD. But interestingly, with the change in the export legislation around waste, so I don't know if many of you know, but from 1 July 2024, there's now a threshold for mixed paper exports. If a consignment of mixed paper has any more than 5% contaminants or outthrows, as they're called, you can't export that. You need a license and you can't export anything more than 5%. There was a time pre-China sword where 15, 20, even 30% outthrows in a bale of paper were still being transacted. And as long as the buyers were happy, no one particularly cared what that level of contamination or outthrows was. And post-China sword, that really tightened up. And of course, now there's legislation in Australia. One of the consequences is there's a whole bunch of streams of recoverable paper, good quality fibre that present an opportunity in Australia. And what we're starting, actually, I'll show you this. What we're starting to see in Australia is, so this looks like a sheet of cardboard and it's been over dried, but it's basically pressed pulp. And normally it's about 50% moisture. So it's more like a sheet of soggy cardboard. Wood pulp, when you recover pulp, when you repulp paper and cardboard, it's like 5% wood fiber, 95% water. So it's more like a soup. And exporting soup just kind of doesn't make sense economically. So it's much better to run your soup through a sieve and press the solids in the soup so you end up with these soggy sheets of wood fiber, and it makes it more economic to export. There have been 4 proposals put up across Australia for new projects to make this. The technical word for the soggy cardboard is wet lap. There's 4 proposals. There was one in WA, which is being canned. 3 of them are still live, 1 in Queensland, 2 in Victoria. And the intention here is to recover fibre from a range of different products, right? So we're talking things that are ice cream tubs, packaging that's used for nuts and chips and things like that, because this is fiber-based packaging with good quality fiber that's worth recovering. Iced lolly wrappers, and people tend, I mean, coffee cups are very divisive, and maybe I just won't. I'll put that back. I take back the fact that I said anything about coffee cups. But there's lots of fiber. And because it's a natural fiber, it's really worth recovering. It's good packaging. We're seeing a lot of shift towards more fiber-based, paper-based packaging. So yeah, there are other proposals in the works, Ryan, coming in Australia to help recover more fiber locally. And because you're then not exporting, bundled up mixed paper, you're actually exporting a semi-processed wood fiber. There's a value add to that. So it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's great news, Vikas. As we know, a diverse market is a stronger market. All right. So there aren't any raised hands. So I might start off in the chat, and then I'll throw to you, Nick, after we've answered some questions here. So one question we have is: are there any VOCs, which are volatile organic compounds, associated with saveBOARD?
That's a great question. One of the reasons why I like saveBOARD is, and hopefully you picked it up from the video, was all we do is shred the cartons and hot press them, and the hot pressing's pretty low temperature. The material that's typically in the carton stream is polyolefin, and it just becomes the binder. So it replaces the use of other glues, adhesives, particularly formaldehyde. And formaldehyde's, in the scheme of things, a pretty nasty chemical. So even products like plywood use formaldehyde as a bonding agent, and you end up with problems such as volatile organics. saveBOARD have got a great environmental certification. The Living Futures Institute has certified the product as well. And there's minimal or no VOCs. So one of the joys of saveBOARD is that there's no added chemicals, glues, resins, and we don't use water in reprocessing, which is a big deal in paper processing.
Great, thanks, Vikas.
Actually, I'm going to add to that. Interestingly, we're starting to make a joinery product, and I was naughty. I bought a bunch of IKEA furniture and had it remade with saveBOARD, and took it to an IKEA board meeting. I thought they were going to slaughter me, but they were really happy to see it. And the feedback I got from the cabinet maker was, he loved the saveBOARD product in comparison to MDF because there's almost no dust. There's massive dust from MDF, so he was really happy to be using something that didn't create dust.
Great, fantastic. I've got a double-barrel question here. Are you planning to expand to other Victorian MRFs? And also, given the link to producers like Woolies, etc., are there plans to offer in-store drop-off collections or inclusions in CDS schemes for all format sizes?
Yeah, great questions. So at the moment, there's one MRF with the AI robotics. Cleanaway and Victoria have gone down a different path. They're using a more conventional optical sorter, which is perfectly capable of sorting beverage cartons. It's typically just that optical sorters are way more expensive. So the AI robots offer a cheaper retrofit solution. So there's two MRFs in Victoria that are sorting. Regroup and other companies across the country sort beverage cartons in their CDS MRFs. So you end up with other than glass, which is kept separate, you end up with a mixed stream for the CDS materials, and then there are MRFs that are dedicated to CDS materials across the country that sort beverage cartons as well. So there are other MRFs doing this. As I mentioned, we would be absolutely delighted to partner with as many MRFs as possible to support them to sort beverage cartons. It's a big deal for us. We're happy to put our money where our mouth is to make this happen. The question around Woolies and in-store drop-offs, let me start with the CDS side. So, I talked about CDS. I'd love, as many people on this call as possible to contact their scheme regulators and ask about when schemes will be expanded or why they're not being expanded. if there are not plans to do so already. As I mentioned, Northern Territory is about to expand their scheme. South Australia and New South Wales have already consulted on expanding their schemes. So reaching out to them, will land in places that has this conversation's already started. And I'm a great supporter of that. South Australia achieves a recycling rate in excess of 65% for beverage cartons through the container deposit. There are some states where that figure is nowhere near as good, right? New South Wales has a low teens or mid-teens kind of percentage for recycling rate. Part of the reason why I think South Australia does this so well is because the scheme in South Australia has been running for a generation. People have been doing it since 1977. They all know how it works. The routine's settled. People know what they're doing and what it offers. The material that comes out of the CDS scheme is super clean, by the way, and super well sorted. The CDS scheme regulators never had an issue with selling the material through their scheme. I'm not a fan of store drop-offs, and I always hesitate saying this when I'm in a Planet Arc session. Voluntary schemes serve a great purpose in terms of initiating behavior change, in terms of making people aware of what's possible, and by picking up the early adopters, the people who are innovators and early adopters and who want to do something different. Voluntary collection schemes tend not to be able to service the mainstream, the majority of the population well. And for that reason, I'm not a great fan of store drop-offs. Red Cycle was a recent example. The amount of material coming back through schemes like that is a pretty small percentage of material that you can get back through curbside or through a CDS.
Yeah, obviously there's a convenience factor and ease of recycling that comes into it. Got another question. What is the cost of recycling? Is it a free drop-off or does it cost for disposal?
That's a great question. So I'm going to split that. Obviously, if you're putting in your curbside bin, you're paying rates for that service. And that's a plus and a minus, right? So there's no discrete or incremental fee for putting in your curbside bin. But the issue here in some ways is that it's a very blunt instrument. It's effectively it doesn't matter how good you are at sorting your recycling or cleaning your recycling or not putting contaminants in your recycling. Essentially, you're paying to cross-subsidize all those people that don't treat their recycling bins well. And I trust that there are none of those on this call. The drop-offs don't cost. We are running drop-off centres in New Zealand. There's 70 some centres across the country. There's no fee to drop off. So yeah, there's no discrete cost for disposal in that regard. Container deposit, of course, you get 10 cents for eligible containers through the container deposit.
Hey, do we know if any CDS cartons are exported in Victoria? You mentioned that some companies involved in CDS still export, where there's more demand for the product.
Yeah, so traditionally CDS cartons have been exported, and the demand shifts. There was a period of time a few years ago where Korean recyclers were big buyers, then Malaysian and Indonesian recyclers, and in the last 12 months, Indian buyers have been really active. So it just depends on where the demand for fiber is, and also depends on what the price for virgin pulp is, right? So recycled, recovered paper gets a lot of currency when virgin prices are high. And that's just depends on supply and demand across the world for other sources of fiber. As far as I'm aware, the first lot of Victorian sorted cartons are awaiting export. So I'm working with some of the scheme operators in Victoria. I connect them to recyclers or commodity traders. I think that one of the Victorian scheme operators has their first container full ready to go, and that's likely to be exported. So I don't know that it has been exported yet, but it's about to be exported. And I think at the moment, the demand in Malaysia is high. So most of the material leaving the east coast of Australia is going to one of 2 or 3 Malaysian recyclers.
Great. I think you've partly answer this question. Will we have similar issues to soft plastics recycling, with the quantity to be recycled way larger than the capacity to produce saveBOARDs and the demand for it, and only relying on limited manufacturing facilities?
It's a great question. One of the issues with flexibles, with soft plastics and REDcycle, was that flexibles are actually lots of different materials. Lisa, you probably know this terrain better than I do, but you know, you might have a plastic bag and you think it's a clear, flexible film of plastic. There's up to 7 different materials that are used to make flexibles or plastic bags. And when you recover them and try and recycle them mechanically, it's really difficult to develop or manufacture a quality product, because you've got this mishmash of different materials. And one of the challenges with mechanical recycling locally in Australia and elsewhere in the world has been just that when you get this mishmash of materials, you can't reliably make quality products. So you end up making, you know, bumper bars, bollards. You really can't get it back into sort of high quality materials. But Lisa, did you want to comment on challenges around soft plastics?
I think, yeah, I think you very much covered it when it comes to mechanical. There is, you know, some, as we all know, some look and exploration of advanced chemical recycling, but it's so new here in Victoria that can't say that we're going to really be at a circular high value material at this stage.
Thank you. And the alternative or the contrast here, I guess, is we're selling saveBOARD into a construction panel market. And if I compare, say, EcoBrace, you know, which is a plywood product used for bracing, saveBOARD's 30% cheaper and has the same bracing strength. So we've deliberately picked a product that sells into a market. And the construction panel market, by the way, is tens of millions of square meters of construction panels are transacted in Australia every year. saveBOARD manufacture less than 500,000 square meters of panels in a year. So at full capacity, they'll supply, I think, something like 1.5% of the market. So we're not making assumptions about the fact that they need to get a 30%, 40% market share. You know, they're selling into a very large established market and have a specification and a price point that makes it compelling. So I think that's what the intention here is. That's what will make us substantially different from soft plastics recycling.
Right. How do councils and recyclers access recycling support from Tetra Pak?
You contact me. That's the easiest way. And I'd be very happy to talk to anyone from council and or their MRF operators or recyclers. And, you know, Lisa talked about the fact that, you know, we've been working together for 3 years. And sometimes that's just part of the journey, you know, trying to work out where things fit in terms of contracts, in terms of services that are offered, the technology that's available. And of course, you know, what Lisa's achieved at Yarra City is to get Yarra City across the line ahead of standardization coming. I understand a lot of people in Victorian councils are, you know, sitting in that space of going, well, we'll just wait for standardization, but there's an opportunity to achieve a circular outcome with incentives from Tetra Pak to do that, you know, to go ahead of time. So please reach out. Lisa, did you want to comment on accessing support?
Yeah, look, I think you know, anyone who is in council and wants to explore this, we can do it through so many networks at the moment that we all have. You know, either FAINA or you know, anyone who's sort of managing those networks. I think Vikas would be more than happy to come and have a chat to us as a group. Or have a little group of us. I'm always happy to come and sort of facilitate a conversation. So not only Vikas, but I'm also happy to be involved in kind of facilitating some of those discussions.
Fantastic. Perhaps Nick, you can put their contact details, their emails in the chat. This is one for me, I'd say. Also, while finding a solution to recycling Tetra Paks and liquid paperboard is fantastic, I'd still really like to see more focus on waste avoidance rather than recycling. What's Planet Ark's thoughts on this? And then there's an example that's been provided on using powdered milk alternatives instead of the single-use alternative milks. Yeah, so we obviously definitely see the need and the greater impact that those higher R strategies, such as reduce, reuse, and then the other 10 also R's that are part of the circular economy, repair, etc. So, and you'll probably see through National Recycling Week and even the information we have on recycling near you, that we do talk about reuse and reducing where we can, because that's obviously going to have a more positive impact on the environment. Yeah, so we're always looking also in our newsletter articles for ideas and ways that our supporters and the subscribers can use those ideas, those positive environmental actions in their day-to-day life. So yeah, we fully support that.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to chip in there.
Yeah.
A PET or HDPE bottle is typically 44 grams. A beverage carton is 28 grams. So just in terms of the reduce, one of the big things for me that makes me happy is we use 30% less material. Now the comparable forms of rigid packaging for beverages, and that means the impacts are less. So, reduction isn't just in consumption reduction. Material efficiency is a big driver. Mass efficiency is a big driver for achieving those reductions. I'm going to go pretty quickly through some of these questions and just chat because I know we're going to run out of time. Are there options in WA? Tess, absolutely. I was just over in Perth talking to Adarsh Fibre. We're looking to develop a recovery program with them. They're going to trial putting us through their repulping and thermomolding process. So don't hold your breath, but yes, there's work going on in WA. We've also done a solution for Northern Territory, by the way. We've got a saveBOARD-like product being made in Timor-Leste, just because it's easier to get from Darwin to Dili than it is to get from Darwin to Sydney. Paul has a question about circularity of liquid paperboard and end-of-life options for saveBOARD. So saveBOARD can go back into saveBOARD, can go back into saveBOARD, can go back into saveBOARD. That's one of the joys of saveBOARD. And they're already doing that, right? So they take offcuts. So if you're a builder and you buy product from saveBOARD, all the offcuts can be returned to saveBOARD, and they just go back through the chipper and back into the press again. Barbara's question, aside from saveBOARD recently, have the cartons collected through CDS been recycled? Most of them, Barbara, are going to repulpers. They go back into a repulper, most of you probably know, it's like a top-loading washing machine. You stick your paper and cardboard in it, you put either tap water or slightly warm water, like 40-degree water, you agitate. It takes about 8 minutes for cardboard to turn into soup. Office paper, white paper, glossy magazine paper takes a bit longer. So typically the cycle is about 8 minutes to 25 minutes. You end up with wood pulp soup. And that's typically what's happening in most parts of the world where fiber demand is high. So there's a query about, someone already answered that question about saveBOARD being recycled again and again. Who do we speak to at Tetra Pak? Nick's going to put my contact details in the chat and Lisa's. Where is the Kirby carton collection happening? It's happening in Central Coast in New South Wales. Ryan, I hope you signed up since we last spoke, because that's your shire. There are other Kirby trials, but they're all soft plastics based. So the carton one's only in Central Coast, New South Wales at the moment. I'm trying to see if there's other questions there. Official name for soggy wood fiber. Someone got it. Wet lap. Yeah, don't ask me why it's called that. And I think that's it. I've scrolled to the end of the questions.
There are some questions in the Q&A function as well. Lots of questions. So whilst we've got maybe a minute left, I can read them out. How much does saveBOARD cost compared to other plasterboard materials?
So plasterboard is super difficult to compete with, and we're way more expensive than plasterboard. We're price parity with MDF and plywood. When it's plywood for bracing, like EcoBrace, we're substantially cheaper. So, it kind of depends on what you want to use. Which of the saveBOARD makes 6 different products. It depends on which product you're looking at and what you're comparing it to. But yeah, plasterboard, not a chance. Plywood, absolutely.
Maybe enough time for 2 more questions. While we wait for CDS to expand, is there capacity, appetite for collections to be set up from local government recycling events or programs?
Absolutely. Please reach out to me and we can talk about that.
A direct question about one of the MRFs. Why hasn't the Fizzy Smithfield MRF got the AI robot beverage container separation yet?
Yeah, interesting. So they came to visit saveBOARD and the operations manager was very keen, liked what he saw. Unfortunately, Visi for me are a black box. I struggle to get responses from Visi to any or all of my queries.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the end. So thank you so much, Vikas and Lisa. Thank you all for attending and for your fantastic questions as well. We hope you found it interesting and informative. So please do get in touch if we can assist with anything. And all the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Planet Arc team. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
And please reach out if you've got questions that we can answer.